Welcome to Interfaith Insights, Spotlight on Faith, and I have a very extra special guest with me today, Dr. Brahmachari Sharan, who many of you will remember being previously the Hindu priest at Edinburgh Mandir. But Dr. Sharan has moved since then to Washington, D.C. from London, UK, to serve as the first full-time director for Hindu Life and Campus Ministry at Georgetown University. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
Namaste.
Namaste.
It's very good to have you here and another chance to have some conversations. I miss some of the conversations that we used to have, and yeah, I think you were telling me just before we started here that you've been stranded in London. I was thinking we were speaking from America, a time difference, but you're actually in London. Is that right?
Indeed, and I mean, it's one of the gifts of the digital age. I could be anywhere in the world, and
I would have no idea with
that
backdrop. I would have no idea.
Exactly. So I could have been right there on the banks of the Ganges. There,
you could be. With these conversations, what we look at is how we manage during lockdown and with this pandemic, and you know, the kind of challenge it presents to us as people of faith, and it'd be really good to kind of get your experience and your wisdom on some of these questions. So the first question that I'm going to ask you is, you know, related to that, is how can people of faith keep strong in their faith during COVID-19 when so many innocent people are dying around them?
That's a very important question. It actually allows us to explore what faith means to the Dharmic traditions. I'm going to acknowledge right off the bat that I can't speak for all Hindus, but I'll give you a bird's eye view as much as possible. Faith for us has always meant faith in the teachings and not necessarily faith in God. It's more important that we have faith in teachings than in God. In our devotional traditions, the Bhakti Yoga traditions, they have very deep faith in God, but even then, the faith is supposed to be in the words of the teacher. And why that's important is because we're able to take into account the realities of the current situation, use the scriptures that are useful for that situation, and act in accordance with them. So this particular situation, we go straight to the teachings of samsara, the fact that this place, this wonderful world that we live in, although is wonderful most of the time, is filled with cycles of happiness and discontent, of good leaders and bad leaders, of health and not so healthy times, all of that, and all of those cycles. We have faith in the fact that we know these cycles exist, and we also have faith in the fact that we know by working on our mind, by working on our emotions, we will be able to survive by also following the best of the advice of the experts. So that faith is strong. When it comes to faith in God, then that's a personal issue between a devotee and the Lord.
But for many traditions, they wrestle with these great big theological questions of if the Almighty is all-loving and all-powerful, then why are people left to suffer, especially during this time where so many innocent people have suffered, and many disproportionately, especially around our BME communities?
I mean, this is a very big question. You know, theodicy is the central question that was leveled against the devotional traditions within the Dharmic traditions themselves. And ancient times, they even came up even then with the knowledge that God was a symbol, the symbol of hope, a symbol of for our devotions, a symbol for our connection within the wider universe, if we were able to really focus on, through meditation, what that ultimate principle could be if it wasn't a being. So we already know that God is our symbol. God is a symbol that accompanies us. And in that, God is therefore not somebody who's going to be interfering with the ways of the universe. We view this, all health challenges and everything, as a part and parcel of the universe. If it wasn't going to happen now, it was going to happen sometime in the future. But whether you look at Spanish flu or the pandemics and epidemics beforehand, this is one in a series of issues that come as part and parcel of the universe. Innocent people dying and suffering in the ways that they've done is something that is absolutely very difficult to understand if you are understanding that God is the one that's pulling the strings behind the scenes. I think our ancient Indian philosophers could never deal with the idea that this was some kind of test from God. They were like, well, what does God not know if God knows everything? Why does he need to test everybody? So for us, the question of God being the one behind all of this is outside, and we start to look for what are the actual causes of the virus. Was it because of human lack of attention? Were we not paying to sufficient attention to how we are keeping ourselves clean and managing how we interact with other people? All of those kinds of things come into question. But what God is in this moment in time is a symbol of hope that, yes, after this period, there will be some kind of period, although it won't be normal, it will be less restricted than it is now.
It's very interesting. So I'm trying to understand the role that God has within creation and whether things are predestined, and what role then karma has in things. Because if our actions determine our future, is it then the case that what is happening now has been predestined? It's part of, I don't know if I want to call it a plan, or because in a sense we are involved in that plan through our actions. But how are we able to prevent what happens, or is this all part of a bigger picture? Because sometimes that's leveled against Hinduism, isn't it? That your karma, so
right.
Nothing you can do about it. That's predestined.
I mean, that's unfortunate. It's kind of an unfortunate translation of a concept that was much bigger than what it's been narrowed down to. And I mean, you can't help but forgive those early colonials when they encountered the word karma. They saw it as an equivalent for the big divine slap that they were used to, the retribution, divine retribution as a concept. That's not what karma is meant to be. Right. Karma is simply the statement that if you are born in a certain time, a certain place with certain circumstances, there is an expectable pattern of things that will unfurl. And to that mix, if you add actions, your own actions to that, there are going to be different ways in which those results will be faced. So when it comes to karma, you could definitely say, universally speaking, that our inability to look at the ethical issues that are involved with our food, how food is produced, the inequalities with wealth, the problems that surround health, equity, and access. All of those things have, well, to me, they smack of karma. This is our human collective karma. But it is not the case that this is some divine retribution, as I said. This is the expected conclusion of human activity. This is one expected end of human activity. So with that knowledge, we should be using that knowledge to say, well, how do we prevent those kinds of things? Or if they're going to come about, how can we minimize the suffering that people undergo because of it?
And going back to what you were saying earlier, if you follow the Dharma, if you follow the teachings, yes, you live a more compassionate life, where you aren't killing, using animals, you aren't polluting the environment. Therefore, a lot of these diseases wouldn't be occurring.
I mean, that's an idealistic look at the world.
Well, and perhaps,
yes. And part of karma is knowing that not everybody is going to be wanting to live in that way, or would not make sense to live in that way. Also, you're assuming that people can, fiscally really live like that. It's very difficult to live in a way that you're completely vegetarian, especially in Washington, D.C., to try and buy vegetables there. It's one of the most expensive weekly shops I have, and I've lived in a couple places around the world. So, so many things to consider. It's just one of those things, is basically what karma is saying.
Okay. And so how do you keep that positivity and positive thoughts where everything is, all these things are going around you? Is it meditation practice? What is it that gives you that kind of solace?
The Yoga Sutras open with a statement that in the first, second, third kind of sutras of the Yoga Sutra talks about how the unsteadiness of our minds and all the emotions that come with an unsteady mind is due to us not being able to control our emotions and our reactions to various stimuli. When we heard about the outbreak The first thing was try not to be afraid, but work specifically so that you can minimize your exposure to the virus, and if you have it, minimize exposing others to your to the infection that you caught. So if you're doing the level best that you can, and you're encouraging others to do the level best they can, then there is no sense in worrying about things that are firmly out of your hands. And the more you practice that through meditation, the more steady you can be. This is not to say that you're not moved by the suffering of people, nor that you're just sitting there waiting for it to happen, as people tend to misconstrue when they talk about, our notions of karma and also of dispassion and detachment. That's not what we mean. But by seeing something, analyzing it for what it is, you take away the kind of ghost of the karma virus or the demon karma that looks like corona in these days and age, and instead you focus on solving as much as you can.
Mm. And how do you support students during this time? I guess they must be feeling a lot of anxiety as well. I know you're in London at the moment, but I'm guessing you're still on hand for some students who are contacting you at this time, and it's distressing also because obviously people may be losing loved ones in care homes and hospitals, and they're not able to say that goodbye that they would normally be able to do.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges. I've done funerals over Zoom. I've done funeral gatherings over Zoom, and to try and envisage. I mean, one thing that I've said as being a very good tool in our kit is the ability to change and update things as the context call for it. It's called Desha Kal Paristiti in Sanskrit. You're calibrating things in accordance with the times, in accordance with the places you're in, and in accordance with the context that you're in. So it does look different in trying to accompany a family through grief now through Zoom than if you were in person, able to do so. So yes, I'm there via Zoom, and I hope that the Zoom version of me is as comforting. But I do know that I think the fact that lots of people have been asked to stay with their families, that's also been something that's helpful. And funnily enough, Zoom has allowed for people, members of family who are distributed further across the world, to still be present in some way, in a way that they wouldn't have been able to be present. So it's very, very unique challenge.
So I guess that there are some pros and cons from this, I guess. You can't physically put your arm around people, but it is allowing more people to come together, I guess, and support each other. It must also be very difficult for many Hindu priests at this moment, Brahmins, because the BME community has been disproportionately affected. I guess they must be dealing with a lot more deaths than what they would in a normal time. It's difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult because, we're used to wanting to come and support families. We're used to not only just the funeral, obviously, it's the days leading up to the funeral, the wakes that we would normally have in the evenings. And then from day 1 to day 13 of what would normally be what is called the quarantine period, funnily enough, where we would actually ask families to stay at home, not go out, not cook food in their own home, but we would have community members coming to their houses, bringing food, and leaving it for them. So all of this community interaction that really helps the processing of grief has not been able to be affected in the same way. So we've been trying to modernize, if we can use the word modernize, trying to digitize everything, but the human connection aspect is very difficult.
It's very hard.
Even then, I've seen people, having Uber Eats delivering food for families who have suffered a loss, or cooking food and then taking it in the car, leaving it in the driveway, and then backing off. So there've been, I think, the effort to maintain that support for people is there. People want to do that, but it's just finding new ways of doing so.
I know that the President of the United States has talked about places of worship as being a priority key place, and should be one of the places that's opened sooner. What's your thoughts on places of worship in that way? I guess it's very different from a Dharmic perspective.
The Dharmic perspectives have that perspective as well. So remember, there are
Oh,
some
interesting.
traditions that do have the notion that God will come in and step in and save them.
Right.
But I think that because the even in those traditions, the faith portion is also in the scriptures and the teachings of deal with the here, now, in the context, use the
Right.
advice of the experts. They will be looking forward for temples to be open. They will miss the fact that congregational services cannot take place, but they will also be able to revert back to the fact that when you visit a temple in India, it's more a case of you and your connection with the divine through the icon. You go there, you see the icon, you feel your connection, you voice through your mind your thoughts, and then you head out once you've taken something for blessing. So you don't stay there for a congregation aspect. That's been more of a United Kingdom, USA kind of model. So people will miss that, but I'm sure that people will relish the opportunity to go back to these places of worship and maintain social distance, using sanitizer, washing hands, all of the rest of it. So I think they'll look forward to it, but I hope that they're not looking forward to it because in a way that would allow them to subvert the guidance, because that's not what the Dharma teaches.
So is it obviously in some traditions, communal prayer is a big aspect of it. So because communal prayer is not a necessity, or it might be within some parts of Hinduism, I'm not sure. So there's maybe less of an emphasis or a need or a desire to desperately start reopening in that way.
There is definitely a desire. For example, coming up is one of the big festivals of the year, the Rath Yatra, and that's a huge festival. And you have thousands of people in the streets celebrating, dancing, sharing out food with everybody that's there. It's really a place where all different types of cultures are showcased. But obviously this year that's not possible. We're lucky in that we have the spectrum, the wide gamut of spiritual practices. So you could start from the very individualistic ones where you're in your own place, you're meditating within your own mind, all the way through to the very, very social ones, such as these big festivals. And I think that we have been working with people to calibrate their expectations towards the more individualistic sides, with the hope that once the vaccines are out, we will be able to return back to the social norms of pre-COVID times, but with the added knowledge that going through this period will give us.
I was thinking about the whole thing about preparing to come out of lockdown. I was speaking to a Buddhist teacher recently who was telling me that actually during lockdown they've been coming together more virtually online meditation together, and a lot of it, the focus recently has been on emerging from lockdown and how we deal with a lot of the fears and the anxieties that we have as we prepare. Is that also something that is kind of inbuilt within your practice, or when you support people, is it?
Yeah, we definitely work, because of working through meditations and the teachings of the Yoga Sutra in terms of managing the mind, and the Bhagavad Gita, obviously, and Upanishads. When it comes to managing the mind, that's our central work with people. But also, because we have those devotional traditions, we have this look forward to being, the desire to being in the company of other devotees. That is definitely there. And so we're trying to help them be realistic in their expectations for how that will happen, given that, of course, in the UK, we have these phases that we're going to go through, apparently, and trying to make sure that people are able to contend with a return to lockdown, should that be necessary, given the data that's available to the country.
And finally, on a completely different topic, obviously there are big debates just now around Black Lives Matters and lots of protests going on. I wondered, is there a Hindu perspective? There must be something in terms of the equality of all human beings, or perhaps it's the interconnectedness.
I mean, it's a very poignant day to be asking the question. In June the 19th, 1865 was when the final enslaved people were emancipated. So in the United States, it's honored as Juneteenth, or Emancipation Day.
Right.
So it is a very topical question. And look, there is different ways for people to respond to this, and you ask a dozen Hindus, you'll get 50 different answers. I think the perspective that I bring to it is that yes, we have the teaching that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that the world is one family, but that should not be used in the way that all lives matter is used. It's supposed to be used in the way that if your sister or brother was hurting, you would drop everything to go and help that sister or brother. And that therefore means at this moment in time, Hindus should be very happy with confronting anti-Blackness and supporting their non-binary kin sisters and brothers who come from the African-American or Black communities that exist in America, because I'm talking about people that I serve, but also in the UK. We have a lot more Afro-Caribbean, and the story of the Afro-Caribbeans is a little bit different than it is to the US situation. And there are a lot more nuance that needs to be taken into account in the United Kingdom. But at the end of the day, Hindus need to confront the fact that anti-Blackness it is definitely, I'll use the word, an evil that has filtered through to our society as well, because the only way that Hindus were able to survive was by becoming or emulating their colonial overlords. So we have some 200 years of unpicking of these things to do. And the best way that we can do it is to return back to our teachings, which says that a wise person should never be able to see any distinction between humans on the basis of external things, or even internal things that people are born with. So any kinds of subjugation, any kinds of oppression, it's high time for Hindus to try and root it out for them in the way that our Upanishads ask.
Okay. And finally, do you have any final message for people watching?
I think finally I would say that if we work on ourselves, we will be able to weather both COVID and do something constructive to support our other human beings that are suffering across the world because of subjugation and oppression. I think that in working on ourselves, we're doing something akin to what you'd be asked to do on an airplane. Deal with your own oxygen mask first before you help somebody else. Because if we are trying to help either ourselves as we go through this period of lockdown without first attending to our mind and our hearts, we will not be able to do that successfully. And similarly, if we don't work to clear out all of the junk that we've been accumulating over time in our minds and our hearts vis-a-vis other people, whichever type of people we consider other, I think that if we work on our hearts and our minds, re-infuse them with the knowledge of the scriptures, that at the end of the day, every single living being, from a human to animals and everything in between, are divine in essence, that we will be able to work for a better place for ourselves and hopefully our future generations too.
Dr. Vrajvihari Sharan, thank you so much for being with us today. And
thank you.
We hope to see you soon.